Nothing like 3-day-old coffee in a cardboard cup, I'll tell you. Brings out all the meanness in a man's soul. Thank God, and I got plenty of it. Bring it up there. Bring it up. Hit him in the mouth with it. Yeah. That's enough of that. That's it. Kill it. I had enough of that. Bah humbug. Got a note here, Shud. Says, Shepard, have you ever had any run-ins with the law? Well, the time has come for some confession. Time has come for confession time. And it's something I approach with great trepidation. Yes, kid, I have had a brush with the law. Several. And I'll never forget the first time that I had a brush with the law, and there's nothing like being involved with the law when you're innocent. Must be really something when you're guilty. But I was innocent. I was really innocent. And I began to understand something which I have never forgotten. Now, most of my walking around successful type friends, their only brush with the law is to get a ticket fixed. You know? That's right. You know, let's face it. But have you ever been seated in a wooden chair next to a wooden desk in a room painted battleship gray with fluorescent lights and two large, heavily built, mean-eyed detectives are asking you questions? Has that ever happened to you? Oh. Once it's happened to you, you don't forget it quick. Or if I may use the correct usage, quickly. I prefer quick, because it's much more direct, and it tells much more of the truth of life. And it happened all very innocently. You know, you can fall into a life of crime almost without even knowing. In fact, without knowing. Not almost, without knowing. No. Any of you have ever read Raymond Chandler? You ever read any Raymond Chandler? You got to read Raymond Chandler. Raymond Chandler is the writer of which Chinatown, the movie, is a weak copy of. He's the real thing. If I may use, the true nomenclature. And now, give me a little sad music, Bill. Just a little sad music, Bill. Please. Nobody knows you, friends. I'd say nobody knows you. Nobody knows you when you're down and out. Just nobody gives a damn when you're down. And I'd like to sing that for you, friends. I say nobody knows you. Nobody knows you when you're down and out. You walk around dragging your tail, 'cause nobody knows you when you're down and out. And the rains come and the wind blows. The birds, they don't sing no more. Because, friends, you got to know it, and know it good. Just nobody knows you when you're down and out.
Once I led the life,
of a millionaire, walking around smoking $10 cigars.
I didn't care.
I didn't give a damn.
Taking my friend's house.
Yeah, just living it up.
Buying high price
Just
liquor,
doing it all.
champagne and wine.
All the time.
Soon I began
Yeah.
to fall
Bring it up there,
so
Bill.
low.
I'll play a little kazoo behind the lady.
No money, no place to go. If I ever get my hands on $1 again, I'll hold on to it till the eagle friends know.
Nobody knows you.
Nobody knows.
Nobody, I say, knows you. Nobody gives a damn.
Down and out.
Ba-ba-da-doo.
In your
Ba-ba-da-doo.
pocket, not one penny. And your friends, you haven't any.
You ain't got none. Now, just take it out there, Bill, and reset that. I'll just tell you how Shepard got himself involved in a scandal. And he found himself sitting in their big old police station, being cross-examined by two mean-eyed and heavy-jawed detectives, plainclothesmen. And I'll tell you how it happened. And in the next room, undergoing the same grilling, was my old friend Schwartz. Now, there's no point in laughing, because that ain't no funny matter. And you find, by the way, that many of the best laughs or at other people's expense, oh yeah, they're laughing like hell when you're sitting in there. Well, I'll tell you how it happened. Nobody knows you when you're down and out. Now, I don't know whether you know anything about the Great Plains states, about the Midwest. Now, you know, it's very hip today to be sort of Bonnie and Clyde fans, but nobody really knows how Bonnie and Clyde fall into a life of sin. And why? Well, I say it has a lot to do with the geography. Geography plays a great role in people's lives. And out in the great bowl of the Midwest, that great inverted belly of the catfish of the deep rivers of our land, it's very different than it is here in the East. Geographically, the first thing that hit me about the East, I couldn't believe it the first time I came out here, and I was only a PFC in the Army when I first arrived out here. I couldn't believe how green everything is. I mean, just green trees everywhere. Now, you just take it for granted that things are green. They ain't. They just ain't nowhere else. In fact, I have a friend, Ed, here. Ed lived out in Kansas. Ed lived out there, and he says he didn't see any green grass until he was well past his 18th year. That was the time they took the trip to Chicago. And that grass was plastic. They didn't see no real grass. Now, I lived in northern Indiana at this time. Now, this is the country that bred such eminent desperados as, say, John Dillinger came from about 40 miles away. And there were others that spread and grew like the weeds that they were out of that hard, rank soil. Now, that soil was sandy. You've got to understand it. Have you ever lived in a place where the soil is all sand, where you just dig right there and you got sand? It's real sand. I'm talking about beach-type sand. Sand. Now, that had been lake bottom many eons before. Now, you're going to ask me, how come this has to do with your life of crime? I say it has a lot to do with it. In fact, it has all to do with it. Had been sandy lake bed. The Lake Michigan had at one time, in ancient times, maybe 30, 40,000 years ago, had spread all the way down almost to the middle of the state of Indiana. And then it slowly receded as the ice age ended, and as the glaciers all went back up to where glaciers go when they're having their vacation between ice ages, and the lake began to recede. By the way, the lake is now moving forward again. Do you know this is one of the signs that many scientists have taken as being a sign of an imminent return of another ice age? The lakes are beginning to move in again. You didn't know about that out here, did you? No, you don't have them. These are great glacial lakes. Well, anyway, these lakes had moved back, and it left behind the sand, the soil. It was just nothing but sand. And all of northern Indiana is built on sand. Just sand. Now, sand doesn't grow much. And what it did grow, I'll bet you've never lived in a place where cactus grew naturally. Unless you went out to someplace like Arizona. You think that cactus only grows in Arizona. Well, let me tell you, we had a kind of cactus that grew in the sand and still does grow in the sand out there. You don't think anything has changed. You don't think that suddenly the state of Indiana ceased being sand, do you? In the northern... I'm not talking about the old days. I'm just talking about the way it is out there. That's sand, man. And it's sand 30 million miles deep, right to the core of the earth, sand. Well, this sand would grow cacti. And so it was very common if you were playing ball or something. It grew two things, three things actually. Cactus, Indian paintbrushes, and stickers. The great scourge of my kidhood were stickers. Now, you know what stickers are like. I'm talking about real stickers. Your pants were always filled with them. They were always in your socks. They'd get in your tennis shoes, and I mean, they were stickers. I've seen a taped baseball hit into a sticker patch that when it was finally extricated by using all kinds of sticks, you poke it, because you couldn't go into the sticker patch. You'd pull the ball out. The ball would be so covered with stickers, it looked like a small, greenish, yellow porcupine. Just covered with stickers, just like a big ball of stickers. Like one of those puffer fishes. Have you seen those fishes with the spines all over them? That's the way the ball would look. And so, about this time of the year, actually towards the end of summer and the beginning of fall, it would be some of the hottest weather ever seen in that area. It would go, I'd say late August, all through September, and early October. Sometimes the temperature would be 105 degrees, and those hard winds would blow. Now, I don't know whether you've ever been in a sandstorm, but let me tell you this. A sandstorm with a 45-mile-an-hour steady wind blowing where it hasn't rained, say, for 6 or 7 weeks on the sand, and that sand just goes through the air like a great big grayish, yellow, silvery cloud, just drives, and walking out into the street would be like walking out into a kind of strange shotgun blast of 410 gauge pellets. In fact, you leave a car out in one of those things, and in 15 minutes, no paint. It's like somebody has done a beautiful sandpaper job, which has actually happened. It's gone. I would see the windows would be covered with a fine film, a filigree of scratches from sand driven against hard windows. And so the wind would blow, steady, hard, 110-degree, mean, vicious wind blowing that sand along. And a lot of the problems, sometimes you'd be playing ball or something, and you would run out for a fly ball, and or fall down or something out in the outfield, and you would get a cactus curse, which would mean these are flat cacti, would lay flat. They were that flat kind, big, round, flat leaves. You know how cactuses look, big, round, fat, sort of yellowish leaves covered with these almost microscopic spines. And if you got those spines in you, which you did all the time, forget it. You can't even see them. But they would fester. And all through late summer and early fall, your fingers would be covered with little red festering marks from cactus spines that you couldn't get out. Oh, boy. Oh, it's a mean feeling. Yeah, it's really mean. But I want to tell you, all right, you want to know how that all led me to a life of crime? Well, you see, there's only 2 kinds of people come out of that kind of scene out there. Actually, 3. Dogged laborers that, just devote their life to labor. That's all. Then there's the other kind, which is they become hellfire evangelists. Oh, yes. Absolutely. Because you can smell hell any day of the week, at certain times of the year. Anyway, you go out there and you can smell the fiery furnaces. That wind is blowing like the anvils of Hades have let go of the great bellows of Satan on you. Whew, that's a kind of a nice phrase, wasn't it? See, that's the kind of talk they have out there. And it comes with you either that or you become a humorist. That's right. I mean, that's the truth. Why do you think most humor, George A. Tarkington, all of them come from that world? Because, you have to, either you laugh at disaster, or you rail against it, or you accept it. If you accept it, you work in the mill all your life. Just bend into the wind and go to work. That's all. Put on your safety shoes, and you're ready for another day at the last. Well, I'm a kid, see. Now, first of all, it has to be explained that no lawns were possible on a sandy soil. And to this day, they are not. So what do you do when you want a lawn? And, everybody wants a lawn. I don't know why. I'm an anti-lawn type, but everybody else seems to want lawns. So you wanted a lawn. Well, people would go out and get sod. You know what sod is? They'd buy sod. And a truck would arrive, and, they'd put the sod out there. And they'd just lay a lawn right on top of the sand is what they did. They bought lawn by the yard. And the truck would come, and they'd level the sand down nice and smooth, and then they would lay the sod, like checkerboard, right on it, see? Fit it all together and sprinkle it, and it looked like a lawn. Now, that was kind of an illusion because it would only last for maybe 3 or 4 years. What would happen, of course, would be the sand would slowly soak its way out up through the sod would slowly fall apart, and it would be gone. Then you'd have to get it resodded again. Sometimes you'd have to, if you were really a lawn cuckoo, you'd have to get your lawn resodded every couple of years to have a lawn. In fact, outfields in that area had to be resodded every year. They didn't just go out and throw grass seed and it grew. No way. You throw grass seed in the sand, and what do you got? Grass seed laying on the sand, that's all. You don't have grass, I can assure you. And so the stickers grew like fantastic. They loved the sand. Stickers grow, unbelievable. Stickers, paintbrushes, and cactus. That would be it. Well, across the street from where I was this kid was Mr. Scott. Now, Mr. Scott was kind of a big deal around town. He owned the Ford agency, and he was kind of big. He had this place where they sold Fords, and he had a garage and all that stuff. And he had this house, brick house, and he had the storm windows. Everybody thought that was really something. He had the aluminum storm windows, very exotic. And he had this lawn. He had a tremendous lawn all around the back, and it was terraced. Its terrace came down, very nice. And it was sodded, all beautifully sodded. And so one disastrous summer, Schwartz and I were out looking for something to do. We were looking for a job, see, because you want to earn some dough. Kids have an insensate desire to earn their own money, particularly male kids. Do you agree with this? And my old man, he always encouraged it. He says, okay, if you want to get yourself a new bike, you know what to do. Okay, go ahead and do it. That meant cut out playing second base and go get a job down at Ascherschlager's, or something. So Schwartz and I went all around. We went around looking for a job, and when you're 14, it isn't so easy. People don't necessarily want to hire a 14-year-old schlump who sits around in the back and drinks Yoo-hoo all the time, and that's about it. And so we no jobs, no way. I remember going down to Mattingly's. No, forget it, kid. We went down to Ascherschlager's meat market. Oh, what do you mean? Who needs you kids to deliver the pork chops? And we got a couple of small jobs, like there was an election that year, which, by the way, also was part of our later denouement, our later demise. The election, just like around here, you have elections and people put up all these posters around. Well, Schwartz and I got a job going around in a truck with a guy putting up posters. And these posters, we had a great big 5-gallon bucket of paste, like it was sort of sticky stuff, with a with a brush, and we would jump out of the truck and run over to this lamppost or this mailbox, and we would just take the brush and go one slap of the brush, and we'd lay this poster on it, and there was this guy looking at it, and his hair. I always remember his hair looked like it was painted on his head. There was a picture of the candidate. His name was Mr. Bielefeld, and Mr. Bielefeld was running for county commissioner, and underneath it was the black letters that said "honest." It says, well, he was honest, So I had no reason to doubt that he wasn't or wasn't. I was at that point embarking on a political career. I was advocating Mr. Bielefeld, and so I would go out with Schwartz every day for about 3 days, putting out posters. Well, now that definitely is part-time work. You cannot make a career out of putting out posters for elections. Unfortunately, elections don't come every week. And so Schwartz and I, after 3 days of putting out posters, suddenly found ourselves out in the cold again, after having earned $1.50 each day for putting the posters out. Now, we had the dough now. And there's something very evil about money. I've often thought about money in these terms. Money is not a kind of thing you can accept quiescently. You notice that? Money is not a thing you can just say, well, I got this money. The minute you get $2 and they're laying there in front of you, you get an insensate desire to have a third one join the two. Maybe, and then after that, you have to have 5 of them, and then God knows how far it can go. You wind up, with a madness. Eventually, you get to be Onassis, I suppose. I mean, if you really know how to do it. But so we had our dough, and Schwartz and I had just made, about $5 a total delivering these posters, and we're sitting around one day trying to figure out how in the hell we're going to get any more money. Well, it was hot, and it was a windy, hot day. School had just begun. And I'm looking across the street, and all of a sudden it hit me. An idea. Now, ideas often, in fact, I say in every case, ideas lead to wars. Somebody getting an idea. I could just see Hitler sitting there one day on the front porch of the Reichstag, and he's looking out, and he sees in the distance Poland. And he says, that's kind of nice real estate over there, Mynheer. Yeah, this is nice. Not as Spanish. Yes, we will go. What do you say? And the next thing you know, the whole world is plunged into unbelievable turmoil. Well, ideas are where it comes from. Now, unfortunately, we have a school system and a whole Western belief that that promotes kids having ideas. You know, I have a feeling that if we had all been born with radishes between our ears, there never would be a war. Or any trouble. We just walk around and moo. That's about all, you know, and chew our cuds. So I don't know, you know. On the one hand, being civilized and having ideas can be really bad seen. So I said, hey, Schwartz, I got an idea. And Schwartz is sitting there sunken into depression. The temperature is about 110, and he had his yo-yo out and playing around with the yo-yo. We're counting our money. Now, why were we saving money? Well, again, there has to be a reason for that. Schwartz and I were deeply in the gas airplane model bag. Now, any of you who have ever gone that route, any kid who's ever decided that he's going to build gas models, knows that that is not a cheap hobby. Just no way you can make it cheap. It's not easy to build your own gasoline motor in the garage. You buy it, all right? And there was a gas number 02 Brown. I recall it was the Brown model. It was made by a company named Brown. We all wanted to get a Brown 02. Why do we want a Brown 02? Well, we were deeply involved in building an airplane called the Flying Quaker, which we had bought. It was a high-wing monoplane, and it was a beautiful plane. It needed a motor. The motor came for about $16, give or take 50 cents. And that's a lot of cabbage. I mean, you know, when you don't have it, it's a lot of dough. So Schwartz and I are sitting there looking out, and we wanted to get this motor. We had about $5 each. We had about $10 saved to buy the motor. We were going to buy it jointly. And the model was almost completed. It was down in Schwartz's basement. It was beautiful. Oh, just lovely. It had orange wings and orange tail surfaces, and it had a dark navy blue body covered with Japanese silk. Lovely, lovely airplane. And that's another story, what happened to the airplane. 5-foot wingspan, by the way. So I'm looking across, and I see Mr. Scott's house over there. I said, Schwartz, come on with me. I got an idea. And we went across the street against the wind. And there was that beautiful lawn just laying out there all around the house, see? And I go up to the back porch, and I knock on the door. Mr. Scott was a mysterious figure who would be seen occasionally getting in his car and driving away, or getting out of his car and pulling down the garage doors. You know, there are certain people you just see in the middle distance that always wear suits and stuff. And you never really quite know them. And Mr. Scott was the mysterious man in the neighborhood. And I knock on the door, and this lady came. And she says, yes? She says, I live across the street. This is my friend Schwartz. And we'd like to know, is Mr. Scott home? He says, well, yes, he is. What do you wish to see him about? I'm Mrs. Scott. He says, well, gee, Mrs. Scott, can we talk to Mr. Scott? She says, so, of course. Would you wait in the kitchen? And so we walk into the kitchen. You know that feeling when you're a kid and you're in a strange kitchen, looking around. They had this big refrigerator and all kinds of stainless steel sinks and stuff in the house. And just a great-looking place. He was standing there. And sure enough, out of the next room comes Mr. Scott. And he was wearing a white shirt. He had black, dark pants. Old man. He had gray hair. Very kindly-looking guy. See, Mr. Scott says, yes, boys. I said, Mr. Scott, this is my friend Schwartz, and I live across the street. My name is Shepard. And he said, well, yes, I have seen you several times on the porch. Yes, indeed. So, well, Mr. Scott, could me and Schwartz have a job mowing your lawn? He said, why? Certainly, that's a splendid idea. Why, yes, I have a man come out from the garage every week to mow the lawn, but I'd be delighted to have you mow the lawn. Do you have your own lawnmower? No, actually, Schwartz has one. So, well, I have my own lawnmower, and the lawnmower is down in the garage, and if you can come every Friday afternoon at 3, I would be delighted to have you mow the lawn. I would be glad to pay each of you $1 every time you mow the lawn. That's $2 apiece. Fantastic. I mean, you know, I got a job. So I rushed out, and it was like Wednesday or Thursday. So I go home, and I tell my mom, hey, I'm going to have a job now. I'm going to mow Mr. Scott's lawn. She said, Mr. Scott? Oh, very nice. I said, yeah, he's going to give us $1 each. So the next day, Schwartz and I, 3 o'clock, right on the old dot, man, I want to tell you, we're there, and Schwartz has got on his blue jeans, he's ready to work, and I got on my, my work clothes and stuff, and we knock on the back door, and Mrs. Scott answers the door. She says, yes? So Mr. Scott said we should mow the lawn. She says, oh, of course, yes, he told me this morning you would be here. She says, I'll open the garage door, and all the tools are right there in the garage. So Schwartz and I run around the side, and she opens the door, and there's his lawnmower. He had one of these great big push-type lawnmowers, and it had a big wide. It was the widest one I ever saw. It was a great big wide, beautiful lawnmower. And it had one of these big canvas things that hang out in the back, and all the grass goes into it, and you have to empty the grass. And she says, I want you to empty the grass back into those bags out there that he keeps back of the garage there, and put them into the bags, and then leave them out where we leave the rubbish, and then they'll pick it up. She says, now, I don't want any of the grass to be spilled out on the grass because he likes it nice and neat. So we worked. I mean, telling you, we worked. We started at, like 3:15, and Schwartz and I are struggling and sweating and pushing that lawnmower and clipping the edges. And they had a little thing that you'd walk along the sidewalk. You ever see that kind with kind of a little wheel on it? That it clips the edge, yeah. And so I'm working that thing, and Schwartz is pushing the lawnmower, and we'd split. See, for a while I would push the little thing, and Schwartz would push the big lawnmower, and then I would push the lawnmower, and Schwartz would work the trimmer, and all day long we worked maybe till about 6 o'clock. Beautiful. Oh, that lawn was fantastic. I'm telling you, it was beautiful. And so we finished. And by that time, Mr. Scott had driven in, and he had parked his car, and he came out, and he's walking. He says, oh, that's very nice, boys. He said, would you like a glass of lemonade? And yeah. So he brings out some lemonade, and we sat on the porch and drank the lemonade, and he gave us each $1. I mean, wow. So we rushed back with the $1, and now we have roughly $12 saved between the two of us. Now, the next week, again, hot. Oh, boy, it's a hot week, and the wind is blowing. And remember, he's got the only beautiful lawn for miles around. Few people have little patchy sod and all that, but his lawn is fantastic. His is sod. It's rich green grass, and he would sprinkle it every day. Had these sprinklers out there with the green hoses and the whole bit. Well, the next Friday, we're right out there again. See, now we know how to do it. See, we know how the lawnmower works. We know how the trimmer works. And we really go to work, Schwartz and I. And the kids are walking by, Flick and the whole crowd walk by and say, we're really big. We got a job. We're working here cutting Mr. Scott's lawn. And they're out knocking balls around. We don't have time to mess around with this. And so we cut the lawn on the second week magnificently. And Mr. Scott again comes home, and he says, say, you boys are doing a really fine job. He said, I just thought I'd give you a try, and I'm really pleased with the way you're doing it. So from now on, I will give you $1.50 apiece because I really like the way you cut the lawn. A raise! There is nothing in the world like a raise. Do you agree with that? Nothing. A raise somehow does something to your head that nothing else does. It's just even if it's only 50 cents, it's a raise. And so Schwartz and I take our $3, and we're flipping. We rush back to the house, and we're keeping our money in a Prince Albert can, which we have hidden down in Schwartz's coal bin, and we now have roughly 14 feet. We're almost on the edge of winning that mower. Well, the third week we are out there like Billy be damned. That raise, man, we were out there like a half an hour early. We worked, we were doing everything. And, of course, Mr. Scott was having trouble with a common problem that you have out there, and that is moles. Did you ever see a mole go across a lawn? You don't know about moles, do you? Well, he had mole traps. Now, a mole will just go right across a lawn under the ground. He doesn't go on top of the ground. He goes under the ground. You just see this little trench. It's like a little. It's not a trench really. It's a little. Looks like a little parapet actually. It's a little mound that goes right across the lawn, and it's just a little pile of just a mound. It's like like something has gone under the lawn, which is true. This is what's happened. The mole has just gone right under the lawn. There's a little thing there. So what you do is set the mole traps in these little places where the mole goes. Now, what is a mole trap? Well, it's a kind of a metal thing that you stick down in the lawn, and it's set. It's got springs in it, see? So when the mole comes along, he can't see. He's blind, see? He bumps into this thing, and whap! No mole. Right? So we set out the mole traps. We're working away there, and we pulled the dandelions, and we even pulled a couple of cactuses that were beginning to grow out back by the garage where the sand was beginning to come up through. Sand always keeps creeping up on this type of lawn. It just keeps coming up. You can't beat sand. No way. If you were to sod over the entire Sahara, within 6 weeks, forget it. The sand has swallowed the sod. It just does it. Just comes right up. Well, we're working away on the lawn this third week. Okay, now, it is now Monday. Schwartz and I have got the dough. So we've got the dough for the brown O2 motor. And we took off after school. We went down to the model airplane place. We had this hobby shop right in the middle of town. They sold model airplanes. They sold paint sets. They sold ceramic sets. You know, a hobby shop. You're going there, They sold all kinds of car models and stuff. So Schwartz and I rushed in. We could hardly wait, We ran in. We had the dough. We had $16. We go into this place, and there was this kid. I remember Jack Selke used to work down there. He was, he was like a local celeb because he built these fantastic model airplanes. He had thick glasses, and he was always winning model airplane contests and stuff. And old Jack Selke was down there that day, and here he is behind the counter. And Schwartz says, "We want a brown O2." And he says, "You want a brown O2? You got." At $16. Schwartz says, "We have $16, and he peels it out. We're both standing there happily. Well, the motor came in a heavy cardboard box that was colored. It was a blue cardboard box, and it had a big picture on the outside of an airplane flying and all that said Brown Model O2, a gas engine, .0317 clearance, .09 had all the technical data on this thing, see? And so we had the motor. We bought the accessories for it, which meant a starting coil. We bought the batteries. We even bought some fuel. And it came with a little dropper, to put in the fuel in the tank. And so we took it back to Schwartz's basement. We clamped it down, took it out, clamped it on the vise down there in the basement, put it on a block of wood, and we started up the engine. It's nothing like a brand new model airplane engine when you start it up. It had a wooden prop on there. There's a test prop you put on it, a heavy test prop. Wah! That thing roared out like a fiend. Wah! The blue smoke, and Schwartz's mother came running down. "What's going on?" Wow! We got that motor running. We are on top of the world. I'm going to warn you, friends. It is a fact of human existence that almost invariably, when you're on the very peak of what you consider success, that is when the big plug is about to be yanked. As a matter of fact, it is a fact that almost without question, the plug has already been yanked, only you don't know it. The great current, the great maelstrom of the eternal drain of time has not sucked you in yet. The plug has already been pulled. So we were really on top of it. We worked on the model that night till about 10 o'clock, and we're going to have a fantastic time when we get that thing done. And we were planning for the following week to take our plane out and fly that little airplane into the cold blue sky. We'd been working on it since June. Okay? I went to bed a happy kid. I woke up a happy kid. I went to school a happy kid. About 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm sitting in study hall, and Schwartz is squatting back there in study hall, when all of a sudden Mr. Wilson, who was our teacher at the time, comes walking back, and he says, Wilson had the study halls around there. Only did study halls. He come back, he said, just got a call from the office. You two are wanted. You and Schwartz. I said, "What? Huh. Who knew, Walk into the office, who's sitting in there but a policeman? 10 minutes later, Schwartz and I are down at the local Bastille. What had happened? I'll tell you what had happened. Roughly 3 a.m., the preceding morning, when all the world was asleep, somebody had stolen Mr. Scott's lawn. I'm warning you, friends, that can happen out there. It doesn't happen here. Out there, you didn't actually grow a lawn. You put a lawn on the sand is what you did. And somebody had arrived at 3 o'clock in the morning, obviously with a truck, and had simply cut up Mr. Scott's lawn, piled it in the truck, and drove away, leaving nothing but sand. And somehow Mr. Scott got the idea that Schwartz and I were connected with the evil gang of lawn rustlers. And I remember the detective saying this to me. I couldn't believe it. He said, "Now look, kid, we happen to know that you and that other kid, that henchman of yours, that Schwartz," and Schwartz was in the next room getting the same treatment, I learned later, "that henchman of yours just spent $16 on a brand new brown Model 02 gasoline engine. Now, there's no way you and Schwartz could have gotten $16 by just mowing that man's lawn. We know this for a fact. Highly suspicious circumstances. Mr. Scott's lawn had remained intact where it was for 3 years. And coincidentally, a mere 3 weeks after you took on the job of mowing that lawn, the lawn was stolen in the night. Now, we're not saying you stole it, but what we are saying is, who did you work with? Who did you tip off about that lawn? Now, come on, kid, you might as well make it easy on yourself." I said, "Oh, my God, I don't know." And then the door opened, and in came my mother, crying. She has been brought to the station by a cop to identify her kid. I hear a lot of yelling in the next room. I recognize Mrs. Schwartz. She has been brought to identify Schwartz. My God. My mother said, "What did you do?" She said to me. I said, "Nothing, Ma." She says, "These men wouldn't be saying those things if you didn't do anything." I said, "But I didn't do anything." Well, I want to tell you, it was only because of some kind providence. They let me go because my mother... Have you ever heard of being allowed to go out on your own recognizance? Schwartz and I were allowed to go home and eat meatloaf at home around our family supper. Oh, the old man was bugged. And at 7 o'clock that night, the phone rang. It was the detective. He says, "We caught him." They caught the guys that did it. And they never heard of Schwartz and Shepard. Oh, my God, saved.
By recording from New York, you've been listening to Inside Gene Shepard. Join us again Friday evening at 7 o'clock for our next Shepard program.